council, it should revert back to that use, that there should be no car storage or car sale or any other sort of ancillary uses associated with car sales on that site.
Okay, there. Thank you, Julie. And Convener, I would be happy to second Provost Bizzett's proposal.
Well,
thank you.
Well, if you just hold on, just finishing off to see if there's any questions, we can get these gentlemen back to their seats. Any further questions to the two gentlemen here? No. Okay, gentlemen, you can go back to your seats. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, thank you for that. Okay, we maybe jumped ahead of ourselves a wee bit, but we'll go back to the Provost. The Provost has formally moved the grant of the application. Has been seconded by Councillor Kelly. Anybody otherwise minded at this stage? Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. And it's a question for Julie in particular. So the planning is obviously retrospective. I'm to be honest, not that keen on retrospective any time. I'd rather people went through the proper procedures in the first place. But on this case, and obviously it's in for sale of motors, and I know there'll be certain gradings. What will they be allowed to do if we grant this as sale of vehicles? For example, I know they mentioned changing tyres. I get that, that's not significant. But will they be able to start doing body work in cars? Will they be able to start changing engines in the cars if this comes under this classification?
Julie.
Thank you, Convener. Thank you, Councillor Bowes. Obviously, the previous use of this site was a car wash in Valley Centre. We received the first complaint about the sale of cars from this site in March 22. The planning permission relates to the sale of motor vehicles, and there would not be any permission included in that for something like bodywork. Generally, what you would require for something like bodywork would be some sort of building anyway. If you're aware of the sort of that operation generally needs to be sort of indoors. There's a certain degree of equipment that would be needed. I think the site constraints, it's quite a small site, that there's no substantial buildings on site that could facilitate car repairs in my view. So I feel fairly comfortable that there wouldn't be any car repairs that could be possible to any degree. And in terms of sort of noise and disturbance, I think general car sales is less disturbing than the car washing in Valley Centre, where you had machinery and generators ongoing on site.
Thank you, Julie. It's a very clear answer. And do you mind, Convener, if I keep going? I'm coming to you, Mr. Henderson. Now is probably, I guess you knew I was. So there's recommendations in here, there's restrictions in operating time. And although what Julie, and I take clearly what Julie has said there, can we note somewhere on this, is that right to do, that there will be no other than minor for tyres, for example, repairs, there will be no other mechanical repairs, i.e. bodywork repairs or engine renewals? Can we do that?
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Bowes. I think I might pass over to my colleague, Mr. Dryden, who I suspect may suggest an advisory.
Yeah.
I was just thank you, and Councillor Bowes. The point you're raising is valid, but I think certainly what's being applied here is a change of use, obviously, for motor vehicle sales, and by the description that implies that it's for sales only, as Julie's confirmed. However, what you're raising is a valid concern, but it would be justifiable to add it as an advisory, just for clarification, but it couldn't be something that became conditioned. And I think by doing it as an advisory, that would make it quite clear in support of the decision taken. This is for the sale of motor vehicles only. But I think there is a factoring degree of a changing of a tyre or a wiper blade would not constitute repairs. But I think certainly repairs are not permitted on the site, and that can be done by an advisory.
And in that case, I'll go back to the Provost and say, are you comfortable with that, Provost?
Councillor Bowes, that's what I said initially. There wouldn't be any repairs on the site, and hopefully that would be monitored anyway. So I'm comfortable with that.
Thanks. Would it be possible to have a look at the conditions, the hours? We've just heard from the gentleman that the chap in the filling station will close the gates at 9 o'clock. But if those gates are open, people will come in, and at some point someone's going to say, "Aye, okay, I'll just show you." And they're going to stick the battery back on to get the car started. That could set off the alarms, and this is my concern. It is a residential area, and I wouldn't like to hear the alarms going off at, back at 8 at night. So would it be possible to make that hard and fast, that these hours that are prescribed here, 8 o'clock till 7 Monday to Friday and 10 till 4 on Saturday, Sunday? Could they
bring Mr. Dryden back in to answer that? So,
No, Councillor, you're raising valid points. Again, I would suggest the best mechanism here would be an advisory, because again, while there is residential, this site is established as obviously not residential, given the history of the site. It has already got a commercial use on the site. Therefore, I think from a pragmatic point of view and the practicalities of specifically mentioning a time in a condition is very difficult to enforce, and there's issues regarding reasonableness, because I think there's got to be a fact and degree of what can be done. And if somebody was to go on the site at 9:01, for example, that may not be deemed as being totally unreasonable. However, I think the points you are raising about the close proximity of residential properties, again, our colleagues in environmental health can investigate issues of noise nuisance should it arise. So to tie in with that, we again could put an advisory on, just to highlight to the operators as part of the planning permission that clearly, precautions have to be taken, and should there be any breaches that would then could be investigated, they can be done under noise nuisance under our colleagues in environmental health. So an advisory would be the best mechanism to raise it as a valid, relevant consideration that the operators need to be mindful of in operating their business should permission be granted.
Thank you for that, Mr. Dryden. Thank you, convener.
back to the Provost again, the mover of the motion. You happy with that advisory as well, Provost?
In the recommendations, it tells you the operating hours anyway, but if it helps to put the advisory in, happy to agree that.
As your secondary, are you happy with that, Councillor Kelly? And Mr. Henderson will come in at this stage.
Thank you. It was just in terms of the motion, which is to grant, and with the addition of the advisories. In terms of the drafting of the advisories, would the members be happy to delegate that drafting to the Director of Police Services?
Yep.
Thank you.
Happy with that, Councillor Kelly?
Happy.
Marta?
It's fine. I think I was kind of hoping this one would be the straightforward one on the agenda, to be honest. I think there's a lot of things that are, I think we're maybe overcomplicating things here, to be honest, because I think there is, to me, the substantive point is there is a lot of development. It is a residential area, but there's already the quick fit garage, there's already the other things. This is actually, in my mind, going to improve the situation given the current permission in terms of noise. And I think that while I do think it's important that we understand business cases, etc., for granting planning permission, I'm not so sure that some of the detail being so is necessarily within our, although that's, you know, understandable about noise. I think maybe given what the permission is for, unnecessary. If it's happy that the mover and seconder are happy with that, then that's fine. But I'm just a wee bit concerned that there's the kind of perception of given what's been asked for in the report and what the permission is for. I don't think these things are strictly necessary, to be honest, and I'm happy that we grant the application.
Okay, thank you for your input. Okay, just to clarify the situation where we are, we've got a motion moved and seconded to grant the applications with the advisories attached. Has everybody agreed? Is there anybody otherwise minded? Agreed? Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for that one. Thank you. That takes us to item 5 on your agenda this morning, extension to dwelling house at Garwell House, Pankerton, Denny, for Miss Alison Masterson. It's a continuation. It's pages 32 to 44 in your agenda papers, and it was the subject of a site visit. The report will be by Brent Vivian. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, Convener. This application relates to an extension to a dwelling house at Garville House. Members will recall that the committee considered this application on the 20th of September, when it was agreed to continue consideration of the application to allow the committee to carry out a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. The site visit took place on the 2nd of October. Members viewed the site and its relationship to the surroundings and observed that the extension to the house is under construction. The case officer highlighted that the application is not a planning application and is an application for the planning authority to determine whether planning permission is required or not. The case officer referred to the criteria under Class 1A of the Town and Country General Permitted Development Scotland Order 1992 as amended, relating to single-storey ground floor extensions to a house, and explained that an application for planning permission is not required if all the criteria in this class are met. Paragraph 3 of your update report sets out the criteria under Class 1A of the order, and the development has been assessed by officers as complying with Class 1A based on the submitted information as detailed in your previous report to committee. Councillor McCabe made a deputation at the previous committee meeting contending that the development proposal does not meet 3 of the criteria of Class 1A. These are considered in turn in paragraphs 6 to 10 of the update report. Turning to the first point by Councillor McCabe, paragraphs 6 and 7 of the update report explain that classes 18B and 22A of the order are not relevant to this development proposal. In terms of his second point, the development extends forward of the existing principal and north side elevations, as members would have noted on the site visit, but these elevations do not front a road. The nearest road to the site is the B818, and the site is accessed from the B818 via a private access. The B818 is a considerable distance away. In terms of the third point, the area of ground covered by the dwelling house as extended is not more than twice the area of ground covered by the original house. The original house in this case is the house as approved under planning permission F/2001/0342 for a change of use and extension to an outbuilding to form a house and as built. No matters were raised at the committee site visit that would alter the previous recommendation to issue a certificate of lawfulness. The previous recommendation is therefore reiterated as set out in paragraph 12 of the update report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Brent, for that. We now have a deputation request. There's an application that has been made by Councillor McCabe, local member, and also by Kevin Forster, an objector. So are we agreeing to hear both the deputations? Agreed? Okay, that's fine. Thank you for that. We'll ask Councillor McCabe to step up first. Councillor McCabe, will you just take your seat, sir? You know the situation. You have 10 minutes, and then there's an opportunity then for members to ask any questions. Members, we'll just take a minute. We'll just clarify something on the technology side. Thank you. There's relevant paperwork that Councillor McCabe wants to show his members. Quite happy for this.
Convener, we'll need to see what that is because we might have to be recess.
Okay, thank you.
Convener, we've got a message to say that the live feed looks as if it's stuck. Not sure if that's the case now.
Just give us a minute, thank you.
If the meeting will forgive my interruption, I can just confirm the live stream is still running at the moment.
Thank you, sir. Okay, Councillor McCabe, you're going to have 10 minutes, but could I say at this stage that unlike the last time where you had mentioned another elected member and in terms of another application, please desist from doing anything like that in this case. We can clarify it later, but just to say that we're dealing with this application alone, okay? Thank you.
I lost actually what your main convener, so.
Clarify later, but you did bring a situation there where you had mentioned another member agreeing to another application, which is irrelevant to this, but if you just carry on, sir, we'll not discuss that at this stage. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Let me quote from the Town and Country Planning Scotland Act 1997. If I could have on screen page 1, just so that everyone can see. And does everyone have a copy of the paperwork? Yeah. Okay.
We'll hold you up again, Councillor McCabe. Apologies for this, and we'll get the paperwork distributed. Thank you, sir. And then we'll take a couple of minutes so everybody can peruse it. Okay, thank you.
Just mention, convener, that I did forward members of the planning committee say they do have it, but it's just to
that's perfect. Thank you. Once we're ready, you'll have your 10 minutes to start. Okay, thank you, sir. Need a few more minutes. Gentlemen. Okay, then, is everybody happy they've had an opportunity to view this information? Okay, Councillor McCabe, your 10 minutes will start now, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Convener. I'll quote again from the Town and Country Planning Act. If I could just have on screen, Jim, apologies, page 1, just the bottom half of it, just so that people can reference what I'm actually saying here. The purpose of planning is to manage the development and use of land in the long-term public interest. Further, the whole thrust of the Town and Country General Permitted Development Scotland Order 1992 and any subsequent amendment is to adequately regulate development in a controlled manner. In 2001, an application for a change of use and extension to an outbuilding to form a dwelling house was submitted and approved. The simple question to ask here is, would an application for a new dwelling house have been successful on the same site without the existence of an original building? The answer is an unequivocal no. You could not have applied for a dwelling house on a greenfield site. The original building had to exist before any dwelling house would be allowed. The new dwelling house only exists by virtue of an original building on the site. The original Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Scotland Order 1992 states that the enlargement, improvement or other alteration of a dwelling house is not permitted if the floor area of the resulting building would exceed the floor area of the original dwelling house. In any other case by more than 24 square metres or 20%, whichever is the greater, and in any case by more than 30 square metres. You can see from this that the original intention of the Act was to facilitate the permitted development rights, but to crucially limit such development to one of fairly strict criteria, i.e. 24 to 30 square metres to the rear of an existing property. That was the intention of the Act. If I could go on to page 4, Gemma, please. I'll now quote from the legislation. Permitted development would principally be small alterations and extensions, would typically include conservatories, carports, canopies or roofs. Critically, the area covered by all extensions, including existing and proposed, cannot be greater than the original building. From these comments, all contained within the legislation. Typical developments do not include extensions of 105 square metres. That is not what permitted development is all about. Had the dwelling house existed as is and not been prior development, i.e. the change of use and 2 extensions in 2001, then a certificate of lawful use may have been an acceptable recourse. It didn't, and as such planning permission is required. A submission for a certificate of lawfulness for the proposed extension is in contravention of the Town and Country General Permitted Development Scotland Order 1992 as amended, and the application should therefore be refused. I could move to page 2, Gemma, please. In essence, permitted development rights conferred by the 1992 legislation remain in place. The use of measures to prevent inappropriate expansion into our greenbelts by development creep is one of the principal functions of the 1992 legislation. The 1992 legislation was in place during the 2001 application for a change of use and 2 extensions. The 2011 amendment was introduced but does not apply to any development initiated before the 6th of February 2012. And further, the provisions of Part 1 of Schedule 1 to the 1992 order shall continue to have effect. It's there in black and white. With regard to such development, in effect, the new 105 square metre extension is to be regulated by the 1992 order and not the 2011 amendment, as it clearly states. The proposed extension falls foul of legislation and should be refused. A normal planning submission is the only lawful means of development. You'll hear very shortly from Mr. Foster, an objector, who was advised in May 2023 that as far as the council were concerned, from a planning perspective, the matter was now closed. Why was he advised this when the certificate of lawful use application was not created until 9 o'clock at night electronically on the 18th of June 23, and it was not registered until the 23rd of June 2023. I should point out that it's quite within the applicant's rights to apply for planning permission under the normal planning process. Members of the committee would then have adequate opportunity to assess the merits of the full application. That's all I feel should happen in this case. That's it, convener. That's the case. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Obviously, you put a lot of work into this, Councillor McCabe. I think we're all well aware of that. OK then, Councillor McCabe has spoken. We have opportunities now for members of the committee to ask Councillor McCabe of any questions. Any questions to Councillor McCabe at this stage? I'm looking around the room, none here. Any remote? None? Just to clarify, Mr. Henderson, none? Oh, Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. I wasn't going to come in, but I remembered the last time when Councillor McCabe spoke, he mentioned about a road, but there's no mention of a road this time, so is that no part of the objection this time?
Want to respond to that?
Thank you, convener. Very good question, Councillor Kerr. The reason I didn't mention the road in this instance is that subsequent to that meeting last month, I then delved further into the legislation, and I came across the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Order, and I think it was in 2011, where it states that the 2011 amendment was introduced, and it tells you that any development does not apply to any development initiated before 6th of February 2012, and that the provisions of Part 1, Schedule 1 to the order shall continue to have effect. In essence, what it's saying is that the 1992 order, it's been amended, and we've then introduced class definitions, class 1, class 2, class 3, whatever. The 2011 amendment says that that doesn't apply where a development has occurred prior to the 6th of February 2012. So that's why I didn't mention that. Just to reiterate the question of the road, I will say that I'm sure you'll hear from Mr. Foster subsequently. There was another planning application, another CLU, a certificate of lawful use, for an adjacent site by the same applicant, which was refused by the planners. Now, that was subject to previous planning applications, went to the reporter, it was refused by the reporter, and within that original report, the council's roads unit actually refer to the access, can't remember, they don't say road, but the access way, which actually serves 4 dwelling houses. within the Gavelt House Redwood Lodge area. So the question of the road has not gone away, Councillor Kerr. I hope that clarifies. I've gone on a wee bit there, Councillor Kerr. Excuse me for that. Sorry, Convener.
No, that's fine. Councillor Kerr, is that your final question?
That's fine, Convener. Thank you very much, Councillor McKay.
Okay, if there's no more questions for Councillor McKay, we can retake his seat and we'll bring forward the objector. Thank you.
Thank you, Convener.
Okay, sir, have you just introduce yourself to the committee and then you've got 10 minutes to make your submission. Then there'll be an opportunity for members both here and remote to ask any questions. Okay, sir, just tell us who you are and carry on. Just press that.
Morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Foster and I'm an objector to the application that has been considered at the moment. Sorry, I need this in front of us so I can see it. Thank you for allowing me to address the committee today. The application is for an extension to a house that was created in 2001. It is situated in a place that has not seen development for over 100 years. It is surrounded by woodland and it sits on top of the Cannon Glen. Many people in Denny will have fond memories of childhood days spent by the water in the glen. Today, people enjoy walking in the glen as a local nature reserve. Earlier this year, work began on an extension that is equivalent in size to a 3-bedroom house. It is just a few meters away from two of the oldest trees in Denny. I think one of the important things to ask is really what is permitted development? As Councillor McCabe has just mentioned, permitted development is supposed to be to allow small alterations and extensions without planning permission. There is nothing small about this development. Members may wonder and may possibly want to ask, how many house extensions of this size were built in Falkirk last year with planning permission? They may wonder and want to ask, how many extensions of this size were built under permitted development last year in Falkirk? Permitted development is not exempt from national policy or legislation. It is not a pass for the local development plans. All of these things apply to all development. The present development is in breach of the Town and Country Planning Act Scotland 1997, Tree Preservation Orders, the Town and Country Planning Act, Environmental Impact Assessment Scotland Regulations 2017, the Nature Conservation Act Scotland 2004, the National Planning Framework 4, the Habitat Regulations Scotland is in breach of a whole raft of council policies and legal responsibilities. It is a breach of Falkirk Council's building control. It fails the council's legal obligations to assess the possible impacts on protected areas, in this case, the SSSI. The Wildlife and Natural Environment Scotland Act 2011. The development not only breaches local development plans, along with its policies and supplementary guidance, it tramples all over them. Policy 19 and 20 may well not exist. Planners may say no, that's not the case, that none of this applies to permitted development. That cannot be right. If you have a development that's impacting on wildlife, priority habitat, the council's own biodiversity policies, it cannot be right. In this case, permitted development rules are being exploited and abused. By seeking approval, planners are asking members to condone all of the above and to basically say it's okay. I ask members to have none of it. It's a matter of public trust. Can the council be relied on to do as it says it will do in relation to wildlife, conservation and biodiversity? I respectfully ask that members refuse this application for a certificate of lawful use so that a planning application is made. This will allow for proper planning assessments on the application to be made, including material planning matters. I also ask the council to order a stop to the work until a planning application is decided to protect veteran trees, woodland and wildlife. I would also like to ask the committee to order that a tree preservation order be made immediately. All of this would be in the public interest. I noted Councillor Kerr's comments or question about the road. The road has existed for 100 years. It was originally built to access Redwood Lodge. In 1960, Garval Cottage was built, and in 2001, a disused barn was converted to Garval House. The 2001 planning consent established that as access for the three houses. What has been attempted at the moment is to change the planning consent of 2001 by permitted development. This is illegal. Only another planning consent can change a previous planning consent. I've also raised a number of material planning considerations. These include the incompatibility of the development with the present use of the area of hard standing for service vehicles, the lack of provision for suitable access and parking due to works, traffic, floodlighting, pedestrian safety, parking. Sorry, I've not brought the papers. I've got the right papers with me. Other material considerations are the SSSI, the priority habitat, the Glen, and so on. I'll just repeat what I said earlier. This is not a comfortable situation for me. I'll just repeat what I said earlier. I respectfully ask that members refuse the application for a certificate of lawful use so that a planning application can be made. This will allow for proper planning assessment and include all material planning matters. I ask the committee to order a stop to the work until a planning application is decided to protect veteran trees. These trees have been abused for the last 6 months. I don't understand why a tree preservation order has not been made. The council has a duty to make tree preservation orders. The root protection area, which is supposed to be fenced off according to the supplementary guidance, has been levelled, scraped, dug into, compressed. Heavy goods vehicles have gone over the top of it, lorries, cars. A few weeks ago, they used a compactor roller on the area, an actual, what in my day when I was young was called a steamroller, to actually press the ground down in preparation for scaffolding and presumably hard landscaping, which will cover from the extension right up to the trees. I listened at the last planning meeting. At every application, the subject of trees came up. And time and again, councillors asked, what about trees? How far are the trees going to be away from the development? That is legitimate. That's what councillors need to do. That's what planners need to do. It's about the preservation of our natural history. I don't know what else to say. I think I've written somewhere in the region of 20,000 words on the subject. If I can't persuade the committee to do what needs to be done, I don't know what else to do. Thank you.
No, thank you very much for your input, sir. If you just sit there, there'll be an opportunity for members, both here and remote, to ask any relevant questions. Open it up. Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, thank you, Convener. Thank you, Mr. Foster. Yeah, your presentation was very good. It was very heartfelt as well. On so obviously site, you know, and I've been to site, not that time, but I've been to site before, and I know how rough the road is going up there. But I'm not going to talk about the road. You talked about trees and tree preservation orders. Now, I understand that they go for certain classes of trees. You don't just get a tree preservation order for anyone. Yeah. Your knowledge obviously sounds a lot better than mine on forms of trees. Is there any specific form of tree that would be? I think it goes class A, B, and C, if I remember rightly.
Possibly, sorry. Yeah.
Is there? Do you know of any there, or? And we'll ask officers this afterwards as well, and to check to see what trees are there, what class they are, and should they actually be protected. You also mentioned wildlife as well. Is there any reserved wildlife in that area, which is a rare breed, but it's not really covered obviously in here. And I'm asking for your local knowledge, which hopefully you'll be able to help us with.
Just in regard to the trees, both trees are classified as A by the 2019 tree report. Both were considered to have 40 years of useful life, which is the highest possible rating for trees in terms of category. Both trees were classed as being between 180 and 200 years old. I actually think that estimate is probably a bit low. The other experts have been up over the last few years and looked at the trees and said they were anything from 200 to 250 years old. Both trees stand at the top of the glen. And as you walk through the glen and look upward, these trees are prominent, as with the same with trees in our garden. The two trees concerned that need the tree preservation order are the same age as two trees in our garden. All of these trees are some of the oldest trees in Falkirk, certainly in Denny. The oak tree may well be the largest oak tree remaining in Denny and the second largest oak tree in Falkirk. They're both classed as veteran trees. You couldn't have more valuable trees in terms of classification. In terms of badges, bats, they're well established as being there. I actually spend a great deal of time with the badges that are left. Last night I spent a few minutes actually within a couple of meters of 2 or 3 badges. I spoke to a neighbour a few weeks ago and he was telling me that he was walking along by the river further up. 2 otter jumped out of a drainage ditch, ran across the road and went back into the drainage ditch. Pine marten are seen occasionally by me. I don't know about other folk, but I have heard other folk say that they're there. The point is, councillor, that at the moment the council has no idea what is there. The whole point of environmental impact assessments is to find out what is there and what needs to be protected. That's not been done. No kind of assessment has been done. I don't know if you need any more than that.
Mr. Foster, thank you. You've answered my question exceptionally well, and I genuinely thank you for all that, because it sort of clears, it opens it up and allows me then to maybe ask some other questions later.
Okay, I think just in that point, we'll bring Brent in on that because that's two salient points. Brent, would you like to come in and just maybe give us some information in relation to, first of all, TPOs, which for everybody is a tree preservation order, and also the issue about wildlife?
I do know that several trees on the site have been through an assessment process by colleagues in our planning and green space unit for potential listing as a tree preservation order. I understand that Mr. Henderson may be able to give an update on that further to what I've said.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brent. Yes, that's my awareness of the position as well, that there's been an assessment carried out by officers and police services. The current position as of the point I went off on holiday recently is that plans were being drawn up that would be applied towards a tree preservation order notice. So I'm not aware beyond that, but that was roughly the stage that things were at. There would obviously be a title check carried out. Also, beyond that, I would imagine the process would be that a notice would be served broadly and also on the owners of the property the trees are located. The owners would have a period of 28 days within which to make any appeal against that to the sheriff. And if there was no appeal, then a TPO could be made at that point. And then if there's a TPO in place, members will no doubt be aware that it is an offence to do certain works to trees without the approval of the permission of the local authority at that stage. Hopefully that's of help.
Councillor Bowes, you want to come back in?
Yeah, and I do appreciate the information from both gentlemen, as well as yourself, Mr. Foster. That gives me some concerns about. I'm actually not overly concerned about the sizing on the property in this one. I am concerned that we are so close, and by the sounds of it, and I'm not prejudging any report, Mr. Henderson, but it sounds as if there is a potential that there is going to be tree preservation orders applied on here. I find it difficult then to make a decision on this today, knowing that there's a potential of that. And I know we've got a wildlife side as well, which could be looking at the area. I say I don't want to get into sort of making decisions. I'm just making comment on what has been said here. It does give me some concerns. As I will repeat, I don't have a problem with the overall size of the building. I have more. It's listening to what Mr. Foster has said and understanding the local knowledge that Mr. Foster has brought up probably a question on two parts here. And I suppose it almost feels as if this is now premature until we had them, because I think when we talk about reasons for planning, and because we've had it before, we had one in Larbert recently where there was trees in it, which became quite a big part of what the application was. I think I would like to know what that was before I made this decision. Other people may have different thoughts, but that's what I would like to have seen that. And I say, let's listen to the rest of the debate before I make any recommendation.
Okay, I think we'll go back to Brent in this stage. Brent, in relation, I'll come back to you, Councillor Murtagh, after Brent. Brent, coming back to you in relation to the issue that's been discussed on tree preservation. Is there a significant impact in the area that we're defining today in relation to these trees? Are they in close proximity?
I might take a step back and just provide a bit of context. This is not a planning application that we're dealing with.
Yeah.
This is a technical assessment of legislation to determine if an application for planning permission is required. It's not an assessment of the merits of the proposals. It's not an assessment of potential tree impacts on wildlife. The consideration before the committee here is to determine whether planning permission is required for the proposed extension. And that requires you to make a determination in relation to the criteria under Class 1A, the Town and Country General Permitted Development Scotland Order. If the committee is satisfied that all of the relevant criteria are met, then it follows that a certificate of lawfulness must be issued, notwithstanding any concerns or issues around impacts on trees or impacts on wildlife. The criteria do not cover those matters. The criteria is set down clearly in paragraph 3 of your update report, and that's the consideration before the committee today to determine whether those criteria are satisfied or not.
Brent, you've simplified it as you did when we went on site. I would like to congratulate you for the submission you did on site, because I thought it was quite complex before we went there. And once again, you've simplified the situation, but we're really here to determine. Councillor Murtagh, at this stage now, we're still asking questions. Mr. Foster, thank you.
Absolutely, and I suppose, and I would agree, kind of thanking Mr. Foster absolutely for a really excellent and informative presentation. I think the difficulty is in where Brent's just said about what we're determining. I don't want to ask Mr. Foster's opinion of where he thinks the legalities in terms of permitted development and what Mr. Foster's presentation has been is very much how we would think about if we were setting a planning application. So maybe I'll hold fire, just as I don't want to ask Mr. Foster that. I was wanting to maybe ask Brent, but I can hold fire to the debate. But it's just whether to ask Brent about, what it was. Well, he kind of almost answered it. Would any of these things be relevant in what we are actually assessing today, in terms of whether there was, if that tree preservation order had already been granted and gone through the appeals process and been upheld or whatever, would that make any difference to us assessing this legal situation just now? Would you be as officer duty bound to give any kind of consideration to the fact that there was a tree preservation order if you were looking at a permitted development lawful use recommendation? Is kind of my question, but it's to Brent really rather than to Mr. Foster.
Well, I think we'll bring, because you summed it up well there, and I think Brent summed the simplicity in relation to what we're actually going to decide here. Brent, would you just want to come in and clarify the situation for Councillor Murtagh again?
Well, I would confirm if there was a tree preservation order, we'd still be going through the same process in terms of the extension. If there was a tree preservation order, that would take its own route, which wouldn't involve our department. I'm not fully aware of what the ins and outs of that procedure is, but it would follow its own route under legislation that would be relevant to a tree preservation order. But it certainly wouldn't affect the route we're taking now in terms of considering the extension under the relevant criteria of the order.
Thanks, Brent. Okay, we're still asking questions, Mr. Foster, or can you retake your seat? Any other questions coming from here or remote? Mr. Foster can take his seat then. Thank you, sir. Have you take a seat? Just switch that microphone off, sir, before you go, and take a seat. Thank you very much. Okay, we've heard their officer, we've heard the local councillor and the objector. They gave fine submissions in terms of their stand on this, and I think as far as I'm concerned, I think it's relevant what Councillor Murtagh had asked and what Brent has stated, that what we're here for, we're not here to decide a planning application, we're here to decide a certificate of lawfulness. And taking everything into consideration, I'm happy to move that we should grant the certificate of lawfulness. But before I formally do that, Councillor Murtagh wants back in. Thank you, Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, convener. I suppose it was to ask Mr. Henderson maybe about options in terms of, as you say, we are here to either decide one way or another on a certificate of lawful use. So from a motion point of view, I'd expect that would be the option. But I think what's begun to unravel in the course of discussion is the, whether members would like to consider it as a planning application if we weren't satisfied that it was under lawful use? And is it a straight for and against, you know, a certificate of lawful use, or is it open to members to say we don't believe that there's a you know, justification under the legislation for granting that, and would therefore request a full planning application? It's just a question in terms of what options are open to members.
Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Councillor Murtagh. It's a really interesting question. And obviously there's a recommendation per the officer's report to grant. If members were minded not to grant the certificate of lawfulness, they would need to have regard to the legislation on permitted development, and they would have to look at Class 1A and identify quite clearly a provision within that they considered was not met by the development proposal in this case, and reasons would require to be given for that. So it would be a matter of going through all of the criteria that Brent set out in the report, and also we could share screen with members from the legislation, but you would need to give a reason within that why one of the limitations to permitted development did not apply, and explain why it didn't apply. An interesting matter I was just mulling over, and I'll see what planning colleagues' thoughts are. And it might be slightly unusual, but for instance, if members were minded to grant, there is a permission that's essentially a certificate issued that perhaps there could be an advisory available on that might cover something along the lines of don't have an adverse impact on the nearby trees, something like that. It perhaps could be challengeable, but it's potentially something that members might want to bear in mind.
Yeah, I'm happy to come in there, Mr. Henderson. I think certainly listening to the debate and concur what Brent has concluded, that you are limited this morning to consider a certain asset. There's a lot of relevant, but again, not relevant information to this particular situation we find ourselves in, but at best, in light of the concerns that have and issues, particularly trees, it would be certainly at best competent to just put an advisory or a covering context to explain that there's a recognition of the importance of trees nearby, but it doesn't certainly change the view that this decision would be that it was solely that this extension is in fact permitted, because there are different legislation. Trees is covered by the regulation of 2010. It's actually the Tree Preservation Order on Trees and Conservation Area Regulation of 2010, separate to the General Permitted Development. What we have found out this morning, and I think certainly what has been demonstrated, there's a lot of legislation out there, but I think we have to focus back into this is not a planning application, and as a planning committee, you are restricted to what you can consider as part of this application. This is to determine is it permitted development or not, and it applies to basically the criteria in paragraph 3 of the report before you this morning on pages 33 and 34. That's those criteria to prefix H. Those are the criteria that you have to consider this morning as whether this is permitted or not. And as what Mr. Henderson was saying, and Councillor Murtagh's raised, you have to go through those criteria, and if you feel you do not support the view of officers, then it's that criteria alone that you have to consider whether you're not going to issue a lawful development certificate or not.
Thank you, Mr. Dryden. Councillor Kerr, and then Councillor Murtagh again. Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, convener. And I think Mr. Dryden intervention there was very apt. And everybody who spoke previously regarding policies and acts, these acts and policies are there for people's own interpretation. So Mr. Vivian puts forward a proposal with his view on permitted development, and he quite rightly thinks it's correct, and it's up to us to decide whether he's correct or not. But somebody else's view on the same thing may be different. So because one person says it's right, it doesn't mean to be right. But it's people's different interpretation of the certain policies. And I just wanted to put that out there. So thank you very much, Convener. I've not had more at
No,
the moment.
before we go to Councillor Murray, I think it's worthwhile saying, we'll say it a million times, there were 12 members on this committee, 12 individuals, and everybody could have a different opinion. And that's what makes it up in terms of openness and transparency. Councillor Murray.
Yes, and I agree with you absolutely there, Convener. I think this is it's a really difficult one because in effect we're being asked to make a decision on planning law, and as much as I love planning law, despite my 2-month parole for good behaviour maybe that away from the committee, I think it is complicated and there are different interpretations, and while I have every respect for officers' opinion and the legal opinion, I think the difficulty is I'm not sure, and this is where I always really dislike the planning committee type process, because I think in any other quasi-judicial situation we would go away and deliberate and have more time, and I know we can do continuation, but I'm aware also that everybody else has had their continuation time, and this is the first time I've really got in about the bones of this application, so apologies. I think I can see from reading the report here again about the classifications in terms of size and the specificness, and I think that there are those questions particularly around agricultural buildings and why if you had this situation in the middle of Falkirk, for example, that the situation would be different, but permitted development rights are different in different situations, different environments, and I think I'm not entirely satisfied that it does qualify under permitted development, and scale I think is something which I am concerned about, and use the general use of the land, but I think I wouldn't be 100% confident without ensuring, going through those clauses. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not a legal lawyer, and I think it gives me discomfort to go against officers' legal opinion when I'm not a planning lawyer. But there is something that doesn't sit right with me about the classifications that it's been used for, and that's my honest view. And I'd like to hear what others who've maybe had more time in this application are considering around the permitted development aspect from a legal point of view. I don't know if others are intending to contribute in the debate.
Okay, thank you. I think, to be honest with you, it's been a very, very interesting debate. This hasn't come up many times during my time within the council. But once again, if there's no other questions, then I'm going to formally move that we grant the certificate of lawfulness, and it should be issued. Now, in terms of what Mr. Dryden has said, would it be appropriate to put on the informative in relation to the TPOs? So I'm formally moving. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. I understand what we're doing here today, and I get that. It's slightly disappointing in that we can't consider the other parts, which I think probably most of the committee would probably happily consider them at this point, but I understand where we are. Looking at the numbers, I'm just checking, and I'm looking at even 18B and 22A. The building's obviously been a dwelling house, it's not been an agricultural building, so that sort of clears that off. The one question I would ask is, so it says, and I'm referring to something that Councillor McCabe gave us, the existing dwelling house is a dwelling house immediately before carrying out the development proposed that it is being assessed. By that, I'm just confirming that it is the building plus I think there was a garage at the side of it. I take it, so that would refer to that square footage of building, and the calculation would be taken off of that. Am I correct?
Yeah, I think you'll see paragraph 10, Councillor Bowes, clearly makes it clear that at the point in time that this became the dwelling house, the original dwelling house is the granting of the planning permission in 2001. It was a conversion and an extension. That was never a dwelling house until that point in time. That was not. It was an outbuilding. It was. I think it was referred to as a barn. I think in one of the presentations this morning. So it became a dwelling house at that point in time. Therefore, that is the original dwelling house, and it's only now that obviously this is now the subject of alterations.
Okay. I'm going to reluctantly, and take this in the nicest way, convener. I'm going to reluctantly second the convener because we have to make a decision on what's here. I don't know how strong we can make the advisories on it. That really worries me. I thought Mr. Foster again, and I know he's still in the room. I think his presentation changed a lot of what we're talking about, but that unfortunately doesn't cover what we're actually here to make a decision on today. I don't know if there's anything planning can do. I don't know what we can do other than putting the advisory on it. If there's anything else the planning department can do, it would be very much appreciated by myself, if nobody else, on this occasion.
Okay, just to clarify where we are, we've got a motion moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Bowes, to agree the recommendation within the report, plus an advisory, and we'll obviously put that to the director for how he's going to sound it. Have we got anybody otherwise minded? Agreed? Agreed, thank you very much. Councillor Murtagh, you want back in?
It's just to say I can see that there's not an appetite on to have any other motion, but I think I probably would have abstained had there been a vote. But it would be possible for for just to be noted that as I don't feel comfortable with the decision, could you just note my dissent from the decision in the minute? That would be appreciated.
Fine. There's no problem in that. We'll put that in the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay then, thank you for that. It was a very interesting debate. And as I said before, the presentations and submissions by Councillor McCabe and Mr. Forster were excellent. So thank you for both of them. So just to clarify again, the item 6, construction of dwelling house at Romwell, Craimsdyke Lane, Bowness, pages 45 to 64 is referred to sites. Item 7, change of use from house Class 9 to residential institution at Linden 15 Windsor Drive, Falkirk, pages 65 to 81 is also referred to sites. Now, I'll just ask Gemma, have we got any indication of a site date at this particular time? And these will obviously be unaccompanied. Thank you. Okay. 30th of October, if you want to put that in your diaries. Thank you. Okay, that takes us to item 8 then, construction of dwelling house and garage, renewal of planning permission at Stonywood Cottage, Pinkerton Denny for Mr. John Hannigan. It's pages 82 to 98 and the report is by Brent Vivian. Thank you, Brent.
Thank you, convener. This application seeks renewal of a 2017 planning permission for the construction of a 2-storey, 3-bedroom detached house and a detached garage. The site comprises part of the front garden ground of a residential property called Stonywood Cottage and lies within an established residential area. Vehicular access to the site is from a private access serving Stonywood Cottage and the neighbouring property called the Willows. The original grant of planning permission was in 2004. And subsequent renewals of planning permission were granted in 2009, 2014 and 2017 as detailed in section 3 of the report. The applicant has advised that a number of serious family events since the original grant of planning permission, including bereavements, has meant that he has so far not been able to proceed with the development. Jack, can I ask you to bring up some of the drawings, please, to have a look at? Firstly, the location plan.
Just 2 seconds, Brent, sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Okay, so this location plan shows the application site in red, the area in blue is the donor property, the balance of the existing residential property. It shows the actual house, Stonywood Cottage at the rear of the property. It's a large residential property in the context of the local area, as is the neighbouring property to the right, called the Willows. If you could bring up the composite plan, please, Jack. So this is the proposed dwelling house, subject to the application for renewal. It's a detached two-story house, as you can see, and the application also covers a detached garage, which is also shown on the drawing. Thank you, Jake. There's also some site photos that would be helpful to share as well. The first one is shows the site frontage, if you can find that. So the shared access is in the middle of the photo there, and the site frontage for the new plot is, as you can see, has a high hedge along the front at the moment. If you could find the next photo, Jack, it's called the shared access. Another view of the shared access, and you can also make out where the shared access forks. It forks to the right to take you to Stonywood Cottage, and the alignment to the left that takes you to the neighbouring property called the Willows. Thanks, Jack. Another photo. This one shows the existing driveway and the house. If you can find it. So this is the driveway forking off the shared access. The application site for the new house is on the right, and the existing house on the property is at the back of the site. You can see that straight ahead in the photo. And the last photo, Jack, is shows the house, the new house plot. So that gives you a good indication of the land proposed for the new house. Two-story, as I said, and it would align with the gable of the neighbouring house that you can see in that photo. Right, thank you, Jack. The application requires determination by the committee because granting the application would be contrary to the current development plan. One public representation and objection has been received to the application. The matters raised in the representation outlined in section 6 of your report and include concerns in relation to rights of access, overlooking, accuracy of the submitted plans, parking and road safety concerns, flooding concerns, wildlife impacts, impacts on services, and construction-related impacts. These matters have been considered in the report before you today. Issues around access rights are a private legal matter. and are not a material consideration in determining this application. The development plan assessment is set out in section 7A of the report. The application site lies within the urban limits as defined in the local development plans. The development plan supports the general principle of smaller scale housing opportunities within the existing settlement boundary. However, this must be balanced against other development plan policies, including, where relevant, the new approach to flood risk in NPF 4, which promotes avoidance as a first principle. In this case, the site is at risk of surface water flooding, as indicated on the SEPA flood maps. This is the main issue before consideration today, and the reason why the application is before committee today. Because of the flooding issue, the development proposal is considered fundamentally at odds with the approach now promoted through NPF 4 to avoid flood risk as a first principle. The avoidance principle is seen as integral to addressing the climate change emergency and making our places more resilient to the impacts of climate change. This is a change in circumstance from when the development proposal was last considered in 2017. However, it is considered that the planning history of the site, the personal circumstances of the applicant, and the scale and nature of the proposal in an area with development already present, when considered together, amount to material considerations to outweigh the flood risk policy of the development plan in this instance. In that context, it is considered reasonable to afford the applicant a further opportunity to implement the planning permission. The application is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions and informatives outlined in section 9 of the report. This includes an informative advising the applicant to use flood resilient features and materials within the development, and that the primary responsibility for safeguarding land or property against flooding remains with the landowner. Thank you, Convener.
Okay, thank you, Brent. Obviously, this has got a bit of history, this site, and going through the recommendation and the conditions and the informatives, I've answered a number of questions that I would have been asking in relation to any concerns I had on this one. So I'd be quite happy at this stage. I'll come to the rest of the committee. I'd be quite happy at this stage to move the recommendation contained with the conditions and the informatives. Thank you.
Convener, I'd be happy to second that. I think your comprehensive list of conditions and it basically covered everything we talked about in the previous application, so I'm happy to second.
Thank you. Councillor Bowes.
Can I say thank you to Brent for a very good presentation there and the detail that he put in it, and just to say that I totally agree with you.
Okay, we've got MD on camera. We've got a motion moved and seconded. Is there MD otherwise minded to agree the recommendation contained within the report, including the conditions and the informatives? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay. Other than that, take this opportunity to thank everybody here and remote, both members and officers and members of the public who made very good contributions this morning. Thanks, everybody. Meeting's now closed.